Alrighty, hello. Today, we're doing our very first episode of PowerPoints with Mr. Gowan. It is me, your host, Mr. Gowan, here with our first ever PowerPoint for the PowerPoints with Mr. Gowan series. Okay. I am moderately nervous for this because I want it to go really, really well. I'm very excited about it because I actually I put a lot of effort into this, okay? Like this took me a solid 2 days worth of it took 2 days worth of stuff that I was actually doing. But it took it's been something that's been festering in my mind for the last year, and I've been like, oh my god, the world needs to know. Also, hello, gaming man 27. How's it going? In fact, I will, in fact, teach you color theory. So today's very first ever topic is color theory and how it actually works. Are you ready to learn? Let's find out. It might be a little bit different than you thought it would be because we're not looking at red, blue, and yellow. We're going to be looking at the real color theory and not that triadic nonsense that everyone tries to teach you. So, let's begin, shall we? First of all, color vocabulary. What colors are these? What color is the color that is on the left? I'll give you a second. What is this color? If you guessed red, you're in fact correct. It is in fact red. That is in fact correct. But the question now is, what is the color on the right? The color on the right is pink. That's right. If you guessed pink, the answer is in fact pink. I know this sounds ridiculous. Why am I going over color vocabulary? But it is actually very important. You'll see in just a second. So, next set. We have two colors. What is the color on the left? If you guessed violet, because the actual term is violet, or if you said purple, then close enough. But the real word is violet. But yeah, it is violet. What is the color on the right? Someone has actually already said it in the comments because they meant it for pink, and I mean technically they're not incorrect, but also anyway, this one is magenta. It is important that you know the word magenta. Magenta is necessary. You must know the word magenta. And then our final set of colors are these. What is the color on the left? I'll give you a few seconds. Think about it. That's right. If you guessed blue, you are in fact correct. But then what is the color on the right? And this is the trick one because a lot of people do not know this color. They do not know the name of this color. If you guessed sky blue, you are actually incorrect. It is not sky blue. This is not sky blue. It is in fact cyan. Gaming Man 27, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's challenge. You have guessed correctly. It is cyan, and it is important that you know the word cyan and you know the word magenta. So, color vocabulary. Going back over it, cyan is its own color. Calling cyan light or sky blue is the same as calling pink light red. That is not the same thing, okay? If pink and red are two different colors, then cyan and blue are also two different colors. It's important that you know this distinction. Cyan and blue, not the same color. Additionally, magenta and violet are also different. Magenta is also its own color. And no, it is not called purple. It is called magenta. And that is very specific. So why does this matter? Why do we need to know the words cyan and magenta? It's because they are two of the primary colors in subtractive theory, which don't worry, if you're confused by that already, it will make sense shortly because we're going to go over it. Don't worry. But yes, cyan and magenta are two of the primary colors. So, let's take a moment and we're going to talk about how our eyes work just for a second, okay? So, our eyes have 3 color cones in them. Those color cones are tuned to very specific colors, and those colors are red, blue, and green. These colors, red, blue, green. Make sense so far? Good. Fun fact, these are in fact the only colors that our eyes can actually see. All other colors are just combinations of these colors. There are no other colors that exist to our eyes. We actually only see red, blue, and green. We just think we see other colors, which I'll explain right now. So, it is important to know about the electromagnetic spectrum. If we're looking at the electromagnetic spectrum, am I going this way? Yeah, I am. Okay. If we're looking at the electromagnetic spectrum, basically how it works is it's a whole bunch of waves. If we start on the left side towards the radio waves, we get these big, gigantic, wide waves. And then as we get closer and closer to the right side of the screen, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then we get these tiny, tiny little short waves on the right-hand side. On the left, we have radio waves, followed by infrared waves. And then on the right-hand side, we have ultraviolet rays, X-rays, and gamma rays. But dead center, in between those two, also, hello, Alex is a squishmallow. Welcome to the first ever episode of Mr. Gowan, of PowerPoints with Mr. Gowan. Anyway, so, dead center is the visible spectrum of light. That's right. Shocking to know, I'm sure, but the colors that we can see are actually just wavelengths of light. They are not actually really colors. They're just visible light that we can see. That's it. That's how it works. But let's explain it just a little bit further, shall we? So, first of all, magenta is a lie. This sounds ridiculous. I'm sure it's crazy to you, but magenta is in fact a lie. Let me explain. So, the spectrum of visible light is a line. It is not a circle. When we are using this line, our brain approximates color by finding the color that exists in between the colors red, blue, and green. So you see this line here. This is the the spectrum of visible light. It is not a circle, as you can see. All the waves that are over here lead into radio waves, and all the waves that are over here lead into gamma rays and X-rays. There is no circle that happens here. It is a line. It is important that you know that the visible spectrum of light is a line. So, if magenta is a lie, how can you see it? Well, let's talk about it. First of all, let's look at yellow. Let's say we're looking at a lemon. When we see a lemon, we can see yellow light that is coming off of it, but our eyes do not have yellow receptors in them. So how do you see yellow? Well, basically, some of the light that is coming off of that lemon is actually red light, and some of that light coming off of that lemon is green light. And our brain sees this and thinks, if I'm seeing red and green at the same time, it must be something in between them. It's yellow, as I demonstrated down here. So if you're seeing yellow, it's because it's something that's in between red and green, and your brain is like, okay, it has to be something between those two, so therefore it must be yellow. Now on to cyan. If we're looking at blue robin's eggs, we're actually seeing cyan, not blue, which is funny because we call them blue robin's eggs. But anyway, again, we have no cyan receptors in our eyes. So our eyes see a little bit of green and a little bit of blue, and it thinks, it must be something in between those two. So it has to be cyan. Oh my God. Charlie apparently has come to say hello. So say hello, Charlie. Hi. Hi. Hello. Oh my God. Anyway, go away. Okay. So, we understand how we see yellow. We understand how we see cyan. Moving on. If we want to see magenta, we are seeing a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. But the color that is in between red and blue, as you can see, dead center, is green. But our green receptors in our eyes are not firing in this moment, so it can't possibly be green. See, we're getting a little bit of red, we're getting a little bit of blue. There is no green that we are seeing,
but the color directly in the center is green. But it can't be green. So, because it can't be green, your brain, for the sake of helping you navigate the world, makes up magenta. Magenta is the only color that we can see that does not have a wavelength and therefore does not exist. It is not a real color. Our brain just makes it up. Oh, Charlie's come back apparently. But okay, so that's how our eyes work. Now, let's talk about primary colors. What is a primary color? A primary color is any group of colors from which all other colors can be obtained by mixing, which means that you cannot possibly mix other colors together to make a primary color. But primary colors can be mixed together to make all of the other colors that we can see. So every other color that you can possibly think of comes from the three primary colors. So then, of course, our very next question is, which of these are the real primary colors? I will give you a second to have a look. Let me know what you think. Write it in the comments. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Or is it 4? I will give you a hint. This is a little bit of a trick question. That's the only hint I'm going to give you, though. But I'll give you a couple seconds. Think about it. The correct answer to this question when it loads, because for some reason this particular slide hates me. There it is red, blue, green, cyan, magenta, and yellow. Depending on whether we're talking about additive color or subtractive color. So it is in fact 1 and 3. Gaming Man 27, you are in fact correct. Alex is a Squishmallow, you are also technically correct. But yeah, so it's actually red, blue, green, cyan, magenta, yellow. Those are the primary colors. And then here's the additive color wheel, and here's the subtractive color wheel. Notice that they look actually pretty similar to each other. The only difference between the additive color wheel and the subtractive color wheel is that the subtractive color wheel is just tilted about 60 degrees. That's it. That's the only difference. Otherwise, everything is pretty much exactly the same. Also in subtractive colors, the colors are a bit more muted just because of how paint works. But when we're looking at RGB, the colors are very vibrant because those are the only colors we're seeing are red, blue, and green. Okay, anyway, so there's your color wheels. Let us continue. We are going to talk about additive and subtractive color. So, in order to understand why and how the additive and subtractive color models work, we do first need to look at black and white. So when we look at black and white, here's what you get. So white is actually the combination of all colors. So it is red, blue, and green light being equally visible. And when red, blue, and green light is equally visible, we get white. So it is a combination of all colors. Black, on the other hand, is the absence of all color. So red, blue, and green light are not visible, so we just get black. It is just complete absence of color. There's nothing there. All we see is just black because there is no color at all. So, brief recap here. White, all colors. Black, no colors. Hopefully that makes sense so far. So in the additive color model, when we're talking about the additive model, we are referring to a system of literally adding color together through the use of light. So we are literally adding red light to blue light to green light or any other combination thereof or therein that you can think of. That is what we are doing, is we're adding the light together. So the way that we actually see this most commonly is through computer screens, TVs, phone screens, etc. Anything you can think of. In fact, fun fact, your phone only has red, blue, and green in it. There are no other colors in it, just red, blue, and green. It just looks like there are other colors because of how we can trick our eyes into seeing other colors. But, okay, so we can actually visualize all of this with a TV screen. So, first things first, we're going to look at pixels. So this is a whole whack ton of pixels right here. Just a ton of pixels. Each 3 grouping is 1 pixel. So 1 pixel has red, green, and blue. So every single pixel that appears on your screen has a red color, a green color, and a blue color. Inside of each of these tricolored squares is a pixel. That is what it is called. These pixels are always red, green, and blue, meaning that the only colors that appear in any digital device, so not just your phone, like I just said, but also your TVs, your computer monitors, your smartwatches, anything that has an RGB screen on it, every single one of those devices only has red, green, and blue. There is no other color that appears. So, when we're looking at a TV that is turned off, or when every pixel is turned off, basically meaning that red, blue, green, and blue colors are not visible at all, we actually just get a black screen, which is how we can visualize the fact that that having none of the colors or having an absence of those colors just makes black. If there is no red, blue, or green light, we just get black. In fact, actually, that's why like OLED TVs are so popular, or why they're so like sought after, is because the way that they light up the screen is they don't have like a traditional backlight. Each individual pixel actually lights up. So all the pixels that are actually supposed to be turned off are turned off. So they actually appear completely black instead of that weird like washed out like gray that you would get on a traditional flat screen TV that has a backlight. But that's a whole other topic. Regardless, the point is, if you have no red and you have no blue and you have no green, you get black. Conversely, if every single pixel were to be turned on, so all of the red, all of the green, and all of the blue pixels were turned on, the screen would actually just be completely pure white. Hopefully that makes sense so far. So, to recap, in additive color models, so digital screens, when no color is visible, we get black, and when all colors are visible, we get white. The subtractive model, however, works in exactly the opposite way. So in subtractive color, having no color at all gives us white, and while having equal amounts of cyan, magenta, and yellow gives us black. My face cam is frozen. No. Wait, how did that happen? Hold on. Oh no. Hold on. Let me see. Camera input. Did that help? I think that helped. All right, great. Thank you for letting me know that the camera was frozen, though. This is good for me to know. Hooray for technical difficulties. Okay, continuing on. So, subtractive color. When you have no color at all, you actually have white. While having equal amounts of cyan, magenta, and yellow, you have black. Why does this make sense? We're going to talk about it. So, if white is the combination of all colors and black is the absence of color, why does this work? Let's look at the subtractive color model. So in subtractive color, we are not adding colors together. We are actually subtracting colors or blocking color from appearing on an object. You basically are not seeing any color at all, and it's a very specific color that you're not seeing. So subtractive color exists in anything that reflects light off of itself. So basically physical objects, pretty much anything that you can like physically hold in the real world, like something that's like tangible, an actual object, something you can touch, that will be an object that will partake in the subtractive color model. So the subtractive color model is probably the color model you should be most familiar with, even though we're not taught it, but it's the one that you should familiarize yourself with. So the thing about light is that light is usually white, first of all. So white light contains every color in it. So if we look at this prism up here in the top right hand corner, a single ray of white light, as it passes through the prism causes those three colors to be separated. So then we get a little bit of red, a little bit of green, and a little bit of blue. But when all of those colors are together, they make that single white light. So the thing about subtractive color is that we're trying to intentionally remove color from what is already there. And that's why the subtractive color is about blocking color. So when a white ray of light bounces off of something, like a piece of paper, and that piece of paper doesn't block any colors from being visible, then we see that object as white. So even though there is no color on the page, it is still white. And it's because that ray of light is white. So all of that ray of light is being reflected back off of that piece of paper and into our eyes, so we see white. When we add paint to a white sheet of paper, we are creating a spot that absorbs certain color waves, and we are only allowing some of the color in a ray of white light to reflect off of an object, which then allows us to see color. So the really important part here is that, so remember in like the additive color model, we're isolating specific colors, the ones that we have in our eyes, which are red, blue, and green. So the thing about the additive color model is we're isolating red so that we have pure red, literally nothing else, just red. We're isolating blue, so we have just blue, and we're isolating green, so we have just green. In the subtractive model, we're actually doing the opposite. What we need to do in order to find the primary colors is block one of those colors. So if you are blocking red, then you are left with cyan. If you block green, then you're left with magenta. And if you block blue, then you are left with yellow. Let me explain why. So we have this lovely color wheel right here for easy explanation. Remembering here that red, blue, and green, or sorry, I did that backwards. Red, blue, and green are the only colors that we can actually see. So when we block the color red from being visible, we are left with just a little bit of green light and just a little bit of blue light. So this color, no longer visible. We've subtracted it. It's gone. So now we only see a little bit of green and a little bit of blue. But what happens when you see a little bit of green and a little bit of blue? When you only see a little bit of green and a little bit of blue, you actually see the color that appears between them, because you don't see them separated, you see them together. So when we blend blue and green together, we get cyan. So the color that we see when we get rid of red is cyan. So we can actually manipulate this color model so that we can see the colors that we want to see. So for example, if we want to see red, so if we want to keep red in the picture, then we need to block out green light and blue light so that the only light we see is red light. The question then is, how do we do that? So let's talk about it. If we block out green, then we are left with red and blue light, which leaves us seeing magenta. So blocked out green, it's gone. We're no longer including it. It's no longer a thing, which means we only see red and blue. The thing that's between red and blue is magenta, which technically the thing in between red and blue is green, but our brain makes up magenta. But you get the point. Anyway, when we see red and blue light, we see magenta. So we've blocked out green, now we see magenta. Magenta is what's left. If we block out blue, we're left with red and green light, which means that we see the thing that appears between those two, which is yellow. So if we get rid of blue, we see yellow because the only light we can see is red and green. Therefore, our eyes visualize that as yellow. So if you want to see red, you have to block out green and you have to block out blue. So therefore, if Blocking out blue leaves us with yellow, and blocking out green leaves us with magenta. Then mixing yellow and magenta will actually give you red. Hopefully that all makes sense. But the thing about subtractive color, right? So like when we're talking about subtractive color, cyan, magenta, and yellow are the primary colors and not red, blue, and yellow, because we can actually make red. We can also make blue. Therefore, if you can make red by mixing magenta and yellow, then red cannot be a primary color. Red is not a primary color when we're looking at subtractive color. So if we're looking at paint, if we're looking at markers, pencil crayons, anything that is a physical object, mixing magenta and yellow gives you red, so red is not a primary color. And that's how that works. Hopefully that makes sense. There's a lot more. Don't worry. This is not it. There's still more. But here's an example of your subtractive color wheel just for reference. So in our subtractive color wheel, we have yellow, cyan, and magenta. If you mix yellow and cyan, you get blue. Or not blue, you get green. If you mix cyan and magenta, you get blue. And if you mix yellow and magenta, as we've already talked about, you get red. And then all of these other colors that appear in between them are just colors that you get when you mix different amounts of these colors together. So if you mix equal amounts of yellow and magenta, you get red. If you mix mostly yellow and a little bit of magenta, you'll get orange. And it works like that all the way around. So, example time. Are you ready? I'm going to give you a Procreate demonstration. This is going to be super fun. So, let me pull this up. Okay. So, Procreate demonstration. I'm going to pull this up here. This little tab over here gives us the value section. So when we're looking at values, we have 3 different color values here. And those color values, as I'm sure you can guess, because we're working with a digital system, are red, blue, or green, and blue. So if I maximize red, I'm sure you can guess that I'm going to get red. If I then completely remove red and I maximize green, then we're going to get, why is it doing that? There we go. But if I maximize green, of course, we're going to get green. Now I'm going to remove green, we're going to maximize blue. And of course, I'm sure you can guess, by maximizing blue, we get blue. But when we combine these colors, so going back to red, I've maximized red. Now if I also maximize green, we get yellow. Now if I take away red and we're left with pure green, if I also maximize blue, so mixing green and blue, we get cyan. And then last but not least, if I take away green and we have just red and we have just blue, we are left with magenta. Now what happens when you add all of them together? Well, as we've already talked about, if you have all of the colors, then you have white. And if you have none of the colors, then you have black. So remember, black is the absence of color. There is nothing in black. There are no pixels being lit up in that spot. Whereas with white, all of the colors are being visible in this spot. So every color is here. We have red, green, and blue. Additionally, if you actually keep red, green, and blue at the same levels combined, so let's say I put this down to, I don't know, let's put it at 200. So 200 red. If I also have 200 green and 200 blue, we get gray. And by keeping those values the same, by just changing the value but keeping all of those numbers exactly the same across the three colors, you get different levels of gray. Until you eventually get black, which is when you have none of the colors visible. Hopefully that makes sense. Don't worry, there's more. But okay, so that was our demonstration. Would anyone like me to continue a further demonstration, or does anyone have any questions right now? If you have any questions, now is your time to ask. Just give it a second, just in case. In fact, actually, feel free to write your questions. I'm going to go fill up my water bottle. I will be right back. Alrighty, so far it does seem like we do not have any questions, so we shall continue. So back to our PowerPoint here. Why do colors have opposites of there is no wheel? Or opposites if there is no wheel? So the reason, sorry, I'm going to pull our color wheel back up here. If it'll go. It's being rude. Oh my God, give me a second. So even though we experience color as a wheel, like the reason that we experience color as a wheel is literally because of the fact that when red and blue are mixed, we don't get green, even though green is the color that would actually be between red and blue. So despite the fact that we don't have anything, despite the fact that the thing between red and blue would be green, we actually end up with magenta because green isn't actually there. So our brain makes up magenta. And because of that, we end up turning our straight line, which would be all of these colors here. So everything from red all the way to blue would be a straight line. And then from there, our brain, because it makes up magenta, creates this extra section. So this section actually doesn't exist. Like nothing here actually is a real color, particularly magenta, but all of these colors should not exist. Our brain just makes them up because they have no place on the line. But that's why we have like opposites. So like in this particular model, yellow would be the opposite of blue, and cyan would be the opposite of red. But the reason we have opposites is just because our brain makes a circle, even though a circle does not actually exist. Hopefully that makes sense. Something I could potentially do is I can go back a bit here. Here, I'm just going to exit out and we're going to pull it up all the way back here. So we're going back to, where was it? Here. So to visualize it a little bit further, like even though this is a straight line, basically what's happening is when we have red and blue, our brain is like, oh, well, it can't be anything in between red and blue because red and blue are shining, but there's no green. So it creates a back door, basically. And it's like, well, we're just going to make up a whole bunch of colors that appear in between red and blue. I know that they're not actually real. They're not actually there, but we're just going to do it anyway. And that's how we end up with a circle, even though color is actually just a straight line. But alrighty, let us continue, shall we? Okay. So here we have what is called the artist color wheel. So the artist color wheel applies very specifically to subtractive color, which means color that we're using with objects. So like paint, markers, stuff like that, as it says here. So we're looking at specifically objects, not anything digital. So if you're using this artist color wheel, then you are looking at subtractive color. So the nice thing about this particular color wheel, though, is that it can be used to figure out which colors you need in order to mix other colors. So the fun fact about this is you can actually choose any 3 colors on here. In fact, I think it shows up. You can choose any 3 colors on here, and everything that appears in between those colors will be colors that you can make using those colors. So as an example, let's just say we actually did choose red, blue, and yellow, which are the primary colors we've been taught, even though they are not the primary colors, especially in paint. The thing about choosing red, blue, and yellow is that we would only get access to all of the colors that are in here. So all of these colors would be mixable, but we would not have access to any bright greens. We would just have a really desaturated green, and we would not be able to make cyan at all, and we would not be able to make magenta. Everything else would be completely left out. So that's a big reason why red and blue are not the primary colors when we're talking about paint. But something you might notice is that even if we maximize the size of our triangle, it doesn't really matter where we put it, we're still going to be leaving some things out. And the reason for that is basically just because we don't really have access to pure magenta, cyan, or yellow. So even though in theory, mixing magenta, cyan, and yellow will give you every color that you can potentially make, we are kind of limited by the pigments that we actually have available to us. One thing to keep in mind, of course, is that we do have CMYK ink, which is what we use in printers. Speaking of which, the reason why printers use CMYK and not red, blue, and yellow is because if you want to have every color that is available to you in print, you have to use the real primary colors. So that's why we actually have CMYK printing. But CMYK in terms of printing is about as pure of a color as you're gonna get. But all of the colors that we use when we're using paint, so like acrylic paint, oil paint, anything like that, even if we're like looking at like alcohol-based markers, we're not going to have a pure pigment. It's not going to be a pure color. It will be a little bit off. So because of that, we're left with what we can make. So we're just stuck with whatever we're able to make in between them. So while this color wheel does have its limits, it does show us which colors we would need in order to mix other colors. So that's very important. This color wheel is very useful if you are trying to mix colors. So as another example here, let's say we choose phthalo yellow green. So this weird little green dot over here. Also, I apologize. I realize this is probably very small for you on your screen, but over here we have phthalo yellow green. And let's say we choose yellow ochre, which is over here. So we have access to anything that appears in between those. Sorry, I thought there was going to be more. There was not. But we have access to any color that appears in between those if you mix those two colors together. Notice there's not very many colors in between them. Basically, we have access to brighter yellows and then just anything along the line of green and orange, pretty much. But if we add in a third color, so like dioxazine violet, we actually gain access to any color that appears in between all three. So one of the colors that appears in between all three, which is selected, is olive green. So you can actually mix phthalo yellow green, yellow ochre, and dioxazine violet to make olive green. Isn't that fun? Like, you would think you would just want to mix all the primary colors together to get the colors that you want, but you can actually mix colors that are not the primary colors together to get the colors that you want, as long as you know how to do it. Another example is you can actually choose a different color than dioxazine violet. So if you still have phthalo yellow green and you have yellow ochre, you can actually choose another color. So like you could totally choose ultramarine blue, and olive green will still appear in there. This was taken off of the internet, by the way. Someone did this. I probably should have just made my own, so I apologize. But because olive green appears in between all three of these colors, by mixing them appropriately, you can actually still get olive green by mixing phthalo yellow green, yellow ochre, and ultramarine blue. So there are multiple ways that you can actually mix the color that you want to get. You just have to find the colors that are outside of that color when you're looking at the artist color wheel. And ultimately, it just depends on how much of each color you add to the mix. So oh my God, Charlie. But the closer the color you want is to the color you have, the more of the color you have, you would have to add into the mix. So notice that ultramarine blue is really far away from the spot that they're pointed to. So you would only add like the tiniest little bit, like just a little tiny bit of ultramarine blue in order to get that color, like that olive green color. You would add a lot of yellow ochre, and then you would add a relatively good amount of phthalo yellow green. It'll still be less yellow green than the yellow ochre, but you only want the tiniest little bit of ultramarine blue in order to get the color that you want. So the artist wheel takeaway. Choosing multiple colors on this color wheel allows you to make any color that appears in between them. This chart is excellent for determining which colors you will need in order to mix specific colors. Also, I am going to include this, the link to this slideshow on my YouTube, so feel free to subscribe on YouTube if you want to. If you're already on YouTube, then good for you. Happy to have you here. The link to this should be in the description down below. But all right, next up, we're going to look at value. Value is a lot of fun too. With value, you can do a lot of neat little tricks. So, value at its like barest like definition is basically just how light or dark a color is. So if a color has a high value, it'll be closer to white. So in this case, a 10 is a white. And if it has a low value, it will be closer to black. So black over here would be 0. So on this particular scale, we have a 0 for black, 10 for light. The higher the value, the closer to white. The lower the value, the closer to black. Value is hugely important in making art because it does give our eyes something more interesting to look at. If everything had the same value, it just wouldn't look as nice or interesting. We're going to have a couple examples of that. So, checking value. How do you do that? Checking value is actually as simple as just making a picture black and white or grayscale if you want to be specific. So if you want to make or if you turn a picture grayscale, you will see the values that you have. So to make something grayscale digitally, you do need to remove all of the saturation from a picture. And you can do this with your objects as well. All you have to do is take a picture and then just remove the saturation in the editing. And it'll give you grayscale, and you can see what values you have. It is very, very important to note that if your picture does not look good in black and white or grayscale, it will not look as good as it possibly could in color either. So you want to make sure that it does look good in black and white as well as in color if you want it to look as good as it possibly could. So here's a value example. Which of these colors has the higher value and by how much? So one of these colors has a high value, one of them has a higher value, one of them has a lower value. which one has the higher value, which means it's closer to white, so the lighter color, and which one has the darker value, which means it's closer to black. I'll give you a second. Write your suggestion in the comment below. And by in the comment below, I mean in the chat, I guess. Sorry. Additionally, once you've guessed, how different do you think the values are? Do you think one of them will be like really close to black, and do you think one of them will be close to white, or do you think they're pretty similar? And the correct answer for you is that they are actually quite similar. Yellow was in fact the higher value, but it was not a higher value by very much. They're actually pretty close in color, or in value. Not in color. They were close in value. Here's another example. So which of these colors has the higher value, and also by how much? So we have red and we have blue. Which one has the higher value, and by how much? Is it a significant difference, or is it just a small difference? I'll give you a second. Have a look. Really think about it. You say blue is higher this time. Interesting. Anyone else have any other suggestions? Additionally, okay, so you say it's you say blue is a higher value, but it is not higher by very much. All right. Well, these are the actual value differences. So as you'll notice, blue was in fact the higher value, but it was actually by a pretty significant amount. Like it was a much bigger difference than between the yellow and the blue. So the red was significantly darker. And that, my friends, is on the power of value. So, when it comes to value, these two pictures, by the way, are literally the exact same picture. Just one of them has the saturation turned down to 0, so it appears in grayscale. But these two pictures are exactly the same picture. But when we're talking about value, instead of having a picture with similar values like this, where we get this gray blob when it's turned into black and white / grayscale, you could have a similar picture just with different values that will look like this. So we can actually see the difference between the different colors, even in grayscale. And the difference is really not that much. Like if we go back and forth between them, like you can obviously tell that the green and the blue are still different, but you still have a very similar effect. So you still have blue and green. Also, hidden secret of brown. Brown is actually just orange with a low value. Here's your proof. These are all the exact same the exact same orange, just at different value levels. So at 100%, it's pretty clearly an orange. 90%, still pretty orange. 80%, still pretty orange. 70%, though, we're starting to get a little bit brown. 60%, very brown. And then everything from 50% and lower is quite brown. I would say pretty much like anything 60% and lower is for orange is approximately where your browns will live. So if you choose anything from 60% or lower in terms of value for orange, you will probably have a brown. Or at least you'll have a color that looks kind of like brown. But yeah, so that's the hidden secret of brown. It's actually just orange. It's just a dark orange. Also, we can use value to create optical illusions. So fun fact, if you surround a color with a value, so let's say, or like with a low value, like 25%, with other colors of the same color with a lower value, so let's say they're 10%, that 25% value will appear to be the light color, even though it has a very low value. This does also work in reverse. So if you surround a light value, so like 80% value, with others of the same color at even higher values, like 90%, then the 80% value will appear like it's a dark color in comparison. And we can manipulate this to make optical illusions. So this is a one PowerPoint that's literally just explanation. After this, you'll have a visual example. Do not worry. But let's say we take a color with a value of 50% and then we surround it with values of 75%. The 50% value will appear like it is darker in color. So let's say we have that on like this side of a page, right? Now, if on the opposite side of a page, we have that same color with 50% value, but we surround that color with other values that are 25%, the 50% value is going to appear like a light color in comparison. But the funny thing about that is even though these two colors are literally identical, because this one is surrounded by darker colors, it will appear lighter than this one because this one is surrounded by darker colors. Or other way around, sorry. The one that's surrounded by lighter colors will appear dark. The one that's surrounded by darker colors will appear light. Either way, they'll appear different even though they are actually the same color. So as an example, in the picture to the right, which one is the darker color? Or in this case, which one is the lighter color? I should have picked darker, but which one has the higher value? Is it A or is it B? Give you a second just to like think about it, just think about it. You don't have to like speed into it, And take a sip of water while I wait. But like also really think about it. Which one is a lighter color? Is it A or is it B? You think A is the lighter color. Remember what I just said, so I'm just going to like throw that out there. When we surround a color by other colors of the same color but at higher values, that color will appear dark. So this one has a low value and it's surrounded by light colors, so it appears like it's a dark color. This one has a certain value as well and it's surrounded by darker colors. Therefore, this one appears to be light. And you've guessed so far that A will be the lighter color, which is a fair guess because I mean, like, we're doing like optical illusions here, right? Like the idea is that like it's going to be something weird. So here's your answer. They're actually identical. They're the exact same color. They just look different. And I'll go back and forth so you can like see the difference between the two so you don't think I'm just making it up and that I've changed the colors on you. No. They're literally the exact same color. They just look different because the values that are surrounding them are different values. And that, my friends, is on the power of values. That is the power of values. So, value recap here. So, value adds interest to your art. The greater the variation of values, the better your art will look. You should check your art's values by making a picture of your art grayscale, and so the way that you can do that is by turning the saturation of an image down to 0. If two colors of the same value are surrounded by different values, they will look like completely different colors in comparison to one another, as we just saw. And finally, really important point, if your art does not look good in grayscale, it will not look as nice as it possibly could in color either. You need to make sure your values are different. It is crucially important. But all right, so that's value. Now we're on to our last topic. We're going to look at chimerical colors. This is a fun one. So keeping in mind that we've already like talked about all of the different like color options. We've talked about additive color. We've talked about subtractive color. We've talked about all the different colors that we can potentially make by mixing red, blue, and green light. So fun thing about chimerical colors is that we can't make these colors. They are literally impossible to make. You cannot make a chimerical color by using any colors that we currently have access to. So how are they made? Well, it shows on the screen already. I'm sure you've already read it, but just in case, they are made by deliberately fatiguing your eyes, so making your eyes a little bit tired, by looking at a very specific color and then very suddenly switching to another very specific color. We're going to have an example right now. Here's examples of chimerical colors. So what you're going to do, as it says, you're going to stare with both eyes directly at the cross in the center of the screen. There will be a colored circle. It'll eventually disappear. If you do have difficulty seeing, you can pause it. Just let me know. But anyway, here's your first one. It's Stygian blue. Stare right at the middle of that circle. You're going to stare right at that X. Do not move your eyes. You can blink. Blinking is fine, but you cannot move your eyes. They must stay directly on that X. If you keep them directly on that X for long enough, your eyes will get tired, and eventually you'll start seeing some weird stuff. All of a sudden you'll start seeing the white start blending in with the yellow will start being blurry, and then when it switches to black, you get a blue. And that blue is called Stygian blue. It's a very specific blue. It's one we cannot actually make, but our eyes can see it. Next is self-luminous red, which, by the way, is going to look kind of pink. So prepare yourselves. Here it comes. Self-luminous red. Stare directly at that X. Do not move your eyes. Stare directly at it. You cannot move them. Allow your eyes to get fatigued by it. You'll probably start noticing that the sharp edge around the green dot is starting to kind of disappear and blend in with the white. It'll probably start looking a little bit blurry. But once we switch into the next color, you're going to see a self-luminous red, which will appear kind of like a weird little pink dot. But it is, in fact, red. And let your eyes adjust just for a second, like give them a rest, look around. And we're going to move into our last color. Our last color is hyperbolic orange. So hyperbolic orange, stare directly at that X, do not move. You'll be looking at this lovely cyan color. Just keep staring at it. Let your eyes do the same thing that they already did. That the cyan color is going to start blending in with the white. Your eyes will start getting tired. You might start seeing a little bit of an outline around the around that blue, or I mean that cyan. And now when it switches, you see a very specific shade of orange, and that orange is impossible to make. You literally cannot make that orange. The orange that you see cannot be made. So this is approximately what they should look like, keeping in mind, of course, that we still can't actually make these colors. So these colors are just approximations of the colors you just saw. They might be close, but they are not exact. But this is approximately what they should have looked like. But yeah, that's chimerical colors. Isn't it fun? Isn't color weird? But alrighty, so that was color theory. Back to this. I'm going to exit out of that because it's being rude. And we're going to continue from current slide. So, our conclusions for the whole episode here is that the world of color and how it works is weird and wacky. And there are 2 color wheels, not one. The additive model, where red, blue, and green are the primary colors, not red, blue, and yellow, red, blue, and green. And the subtractive model, where cyan, magenta, and yellow are the primary colors. Magenta also is a lie. It is not real. It is literally an optical illusion created by our eyes. Our brain just makes it up. If your art does not look good in grayscale, it will not look as good as it possibly could in color either. So you need to fix your values. Make sure the values are different enough that it looks good in grayscale. And then finally, chimerical colors are weird as hell and basically don't matter at all because you can't make them. So it literally doesn't matter, but they're still interesting nonetheless. So there you go. I hope that you enjoyed this lovely lesson in color theory. Thanks for watching. Feel free to follow, like, and or subscribe depending on which stream you are on. Are you on Twitch like right now, because that's what I'm streaming it on? Or are you on YouTube? Because by the way, for anyone who's watching it on Twitch right now, I will be uploading this to YouTube. So if you feel like you missed anything or if you want a recap, you are welcome to go watch it. It will be uploaded tomorrow at about 7 p.m. because I can't upload it any earlier than that because I'm kind of stuck with having to wait exactly 24 hours. So So if you are interested in rewatching or going through a very specific section again for further explanation or for a recap, you will be able to see it tomorrow at about 7 p.m. on YouTube. Additionally, I will be making sure that the link to the slideshow appears in the description of the video. If you would like to send any compensation my way, I will not be mad about it. You are more than welcome to, but also don't feel like you have to. I am just providing this as a free service. Do with this as you will. What you decide to do with this newfound information is entirely up to you. It kind of blows all of the triadic color nonsense out of the water, so yeah. But the nice thing is that you should have a better idea of how color works now. So if you actually want to go like mixing paints and stuff, it should be a lot easier. You shouldn't have as much of an issue. But alrighty, I am going to end this particular stream, so I'm going to end this here. But if you stick around, you are welcome to do so because I am going to play some Final Fantasy XIV. I'm going to continue the story because I'm kind of bored with where I am right now. So, but I will be back in just a moment. I just have to get that all set up. But thank you so much for watching. Follow, like, and or subscribe. This has been PowerPoints with Mr. Gowan, and I am your host, Mr. Gowan. Have a good one. Bye.